This dog cried when the vet said he only had 1 hour to live. Then the unthinkable happened. Emily sobbed into her dog's fur, and the dog seemed to cry with her. Gemma had tears in her eyes too. Emily couldn't picture life without her beloved companion. They had been through so much together and helped each other survive. Now the vet had said that Gemma had just about an hour left to live. Emily was devastated. Another loss might be more than she could handle. As if sensing her pain, the dog whimpered gently and leaned closer, trying to comfort her. That made it even harder. The two had met at a time when they both desperately needed someone. Gemma's life had started off terribly. A worried neighbor had alerted animal services after seeing too many starving dogs in one yard. The shelter responded, and what they discovered was disturbing. They quickly contacted the local police, and the two teams moved in right away. The house was in a terrible state, filled with trash, and among the mess lived 16 dogs, all painfully thin with ribs showing. It was obvious they hadn't been fed properly. They were terrified, weak, and badly neglected. While searching through the home, the team even discovered a box of puppies under a bed. Sadly, they hadn't survived. It was a heartbreaking sight. Among all the dogs, one stood out, a young female, about 8 months old, who was already pregnant. While dogs can get pregnant as early as 6 months, it's far from ideal, and it was clear the owners hadn't cared for her any better because of it. She was so emaciated that her belly looked even larger by contrast. She could barely stand and had to be carried out, stumbling from weakness. Every time someone touched her, she trembled in fear. This dog, and all the others, needed urgent care and kindness. The owners of the house were charged with animal cruelty and fined. The pregnant dog was taken to the shelter and named Gemma. When they gave her food for the first time, she ate like she hadn't had a proper meal in ages. Competing for scraps had likely left her malnourished for a long time. The staff had to make sure she didn't eat too much at once and get sick. They did everything they could to prepare her body for giving birth. Still, her puppies didn't receive all the nutrients they needed in the womb. Despite the shelter's support during labor, only 2 of the 5 puppies survived. Gemma recovered quickly as a mom, but she was clearly grieving. It was as if she understood she had lost 3 of her babies. She wasn't playful, and she panicked every time the shelter staff took one of her puppies to check on them. She was given time and space to heal, but sadness still clung to her. The staff realized she would thrive much better in a loving home. One staff member thought she knew just the right person, her sister, Emily. Leo had worked at the shelter for some time, but it was actually Emily who had introduced her to animal rescue. Emily used to volunteer often, but something terrible had happened months earlier that changed everything. Leah was deeply concerned for her sister. Emily had gone through a lot, and no one seemed to know how to reach her. Just a few months earlier, Emily had been living her dream. She and her husband, both military veterans, had just returned home after serving 3 tours abroad. They had met overseas on their last tour in Afghanistan and instantly fell in love when they finally settled into a more stable life. They got married and welcomed a beautiful daughter who was around 3 years old at the time. Their life felt perfect, almost like a fairy tale. One day, however, Emily came down with a bad flu. Her husband did everything he could to care for her, while also keeping their toddler entertained. Around lunchtime, he brought her soup and drinks, then decided to take their daughter out for ice cream so Emily could rest. She fell asleep almost immediately after the door closed behind them. A few hours later, a knock at the front door woke her up. At first, she tried to ignore it, but the knocking continued. Emily finally got up, slightly annoyed, hoping it wasn't someone trying to sell something. She even thought that if it was her husband who had forgotten his keys, he was going to hear about it. But her heart sank when she peeked out the window. Standing at the door were police officers. She didn't know why, but fear washed over her instantly. Nothing could have prepared her for what they were about to say. There had been a tragic accident. They told her that neither her husband nor her little girl had survived. Later, Emily would say she heard screams of horror, but didn't realize they were coming from her own mouth. The police contacted her family, and everyone rushed to be with her, but there was little anyone could do. The two people closest to her had been taken away in an instant, and nothing could bring them back. For months, Emily couldn't function. She had faced pain, loss, and combat before. But this grief was unlike anything she had known. Losing her first love and their precious daughter consumed her completely and left her almost unable to cope. She barely left the house. Naturally, her family and friends were deeply worried. The lively, driven woman they once knew had been replaced by someone hollow, someone they had to remind to eat and care for herself. She would sit for long stretches, staring into nothing, as if replaying the moment she received the news again and again. Her family wished she would cry or talk about her feelings, but instead she shut everyone out. After her military career, her love of animals had always been one of her greatest passions. Yet she even stopped volunteering at the shelter. She stopped living altogether, cutting herself off from anyone or anything that reminded her of her husband and daughter. Nothing brought her joy anymore. Her family felt helpless, unsure how to reach her. But as Leah looked at Gemma in the shelter, she noticed the same heavy sadness surrounding her, the same despair she had seen in her sister. She believed that Gemma and Emily could help one another heal. Emily had always wanted a dog, but planned to wait until her daughter was older. Now that dream would never happen. Emily's home and heart were empty, and Gemma and her puppies needed care, safety, and a calm place to rest. Leah was convinced they could fill the emptiness in each other's lives. The hardest part would be convincing Emily. At first, Emily refused completely. She couldn't imagine being responsible for anyone or anything when it already took every bit of strength she had just to take a bath. But then Leah showed her a video of Gemma and the puppies. In the video, Gemma sat quietly in the corner on the cold stone floor while her puppies played around her. She licked them and gave them gentle affection, but her sadness was obvious. The sight touched Emily deeply. Despite her doubts, she agreed to foster the little family, but only on one condition. She would care for them until another foster home was found. On their first day in Emily's home, the puppies were full of energy, running around the garden, exploring every corner. Gemma, however, simply lay on the grass, watching them. For the first time in months, something inside Emily shifted. The dog's pain mirrored her own, and it broke through her emotional wall. She sank to the grass, tears pouring down her face in a release she hadn't allowed herself in ages. It didn't exactly bring peace, but it let her finally breathe. She sat there, face buried in her knees, quietly sobbing. As her emotions slowly settled, she felt something warm and soft against her back. Gemma had moved closer, offering comfort in her quiet way. That moment marked the beginning of something special. From then on, Emily and Gemma began to connect, each bringing the other a sense of calm. But trust wasn't instant. It took time. Gemma had shown her heart that first day in the garden, but that didn't mean she fully trusted Emily. Loud noises made her flinch, and she was still unsure about walking through the house. She needed time to feel safe. The puppies, on the other hand, warmed up right away. Their playful energy brought laughter back into Emily's life, something she hadn't experienced in so long. They loved snuggling with her on the couch and playing endlessly. Gemma remained more cautious, but the first time she climbed up on the couch and gently rested her head on Emily's lap, it felt like a major step forward. Not long after that, Gemma joined Emily on her bed. Feeling that warm presence beside her felt like a small patch over a deep wound. Nothing could erase Emily's pain, but helping Gemma heal and seeing her grow more confident allowed Emily to begin functioning again. Every little milestone felt like a miracle. The first time Gemma grabbed a dog toy and shook it around, Emily was amazed. They even played tug together, and if one of the puppies tried to steal the toy, Gemma always let them have it. She was sweet, gentle, and protective, especially toward Emily. Their bond grew unshakable. They were connected not just by love, but by grief they both understood. Emily's family would forever be grateful to the dog who had helped bring her back from the edge. Emily knew without a doubt that she couldn't let Gemma go. She called the shelter and told them her decision. She was adopting Gemma. The only hard part was knowing she couldn't adopt the puppies too. That meant they would find new families, and Gemma might never see them again. But then something beautiful happened. Leah, Emily's sister, and one of their closest friends decided to adopt the two puppies together. This meant they would stay nearby, and they could visit Gemma often. She wouldn't lose them after all. After the puppies moved into their forever homes, Gemma and Emily became even closer. The moments Emily used to dread were now manageable with Gemma beside her. For over a year after losing her family, Emily hadn't wanted to travel or do anything. But on the anniversary of their passing, she decided she needed to visit their favorite beach for the weekend. It was hard, but Gemma stayed right by her side, making the trip bearable. It helped her heal a little, though the pain would always remain. And a few years later, she would face another terrible moment. It had been a couple of years after Emily lost her family, and she had started to put her life back together. She had started working again, and was fortunate that most of her work could be done from home, only requiring office visits every few weeks. Because of that, Gemma was rarely left alone. Emily also felt it was time to move into a smaller house. Her old home was full of memories that were hard to face, and it was far too much for one person to manage. It reminded her constantly of everything she had lost. The original plan had been to fill that house with children, and since that would never happen now, she decided a smaller place made more sense. Her house sold quickly, but the new one wouldn't be ready for a few months. During that time, she chose to rent a home, a decision she would later regret deeply. Emily and Gemma settled into the rental and spent a few quiet days there. Emily hated leaving Gemma alone in a new place, but she had no choice and had to go into the office. When she returned, Emily was met with a horrifying sight. The gate and front door were wide open. Her own safety didn't even cross her mind. All she could think about was finding Gemma. What she found was devastating. Gemma was lying on the bed, vomit beside her. She was shaking, and her gums were nearly white. Emily knew immediately. Gemma had been poisoned. Without hesitation, she scooped her up and rushed to the car. She didn't stop to check what had been stolen. Fighting traffic, Emily sped to the nearest veterinary clinic. While the staff worked on Gemma, Emily called Leah, crying uncontrollably. The thought of losing Gemma, after everything she had already endured, was unbearable. This felt like it might finally break her. The vet came out before Leah arrived, and the news was not what Emily had hoped for. They brought her to Gemma and gently told her she needed to prepare herself. The vet said Gemma only had about an hour left to live. As Emily sobbed, something strange happened. It looked as though tears were flowing from Gemma's eyes as well. It could have been from how sick she was, or maybe, as Emily believed, Gemma knew Emily couldn't survive another loss. When Leah arrived, Emily was crying into Gemma's fur. She begged the vet to do something, anything. But they explained that Gemma's kidneys were failing. Whatever poison she had ingested had severely damaged them. They could give medication and temporarily stabilize her, but it wouldn't change the outcome. Even if they gained a few more hours or days, her kidneys would fail completely. She would die either way. But then the unthinkable happened. Leah once again came up with a plan to help her sister. She spoke privately with the vet, and shortly after he returned and began administering treatment to Gemma. Emily didn't understand what was happening, but all her attention was on her dog. Most of the poison had already been expelled from Gemma's system through vomiting, which meant it wasn't causing further damage. It took hours to stabilize her, and through it all, Emily never left Gemma's side. Eventually, Gemma was no longer in immediate danger. With pain medication and supportive care, she finally relaxed and drifted into sleep. Exhausted, Emily lay down beside her and fell asleep too. By morning, Leah came into the room with incredible news. They were going to try to save Gemma. It felt like a miracle, even though the odds were still very slim. The vet was willing to attempt a kidney transplant, but only after making sure it was even possible and that Leah understood all the risks before telling Emily. Dogs can survive with just one kidney, which makes donation possible. However, kidney transplants in dogs are extremely rare for several reasons. First, finding a compatible donor is often very difficult. Second, the success rate after surgery is quite low. While there have been cases where dogs lived anywhere from 3 to 8 years after a transplant, only about 36 to 40% survived past the first 100 days following surgery. Even knowing this, Leah felt the risk was worth taking because she understood how much Gemma meant to Emily. The first step was testing Gemma's 2 puppies, and one of them turned out to be a perfect match. That puppy had the chance to save his mother's life, and since his owner was a close friend, she agreed without hesitation. The next challenge was the cost. A kidney transplant, assuming no complications, could cost anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000. And that was just the beginning. Ongoing veterinary visits, regular blood and urine tests, and lifelong anti-rejection medication would also be required. Emily had some money from her husband's life insurance, but much of it had been spent during the time she couldn't work. Even with some of the proceeds from selling her house, it still wouldn't be enough. That's when her friends and family stepped in. When Emily lost her family, they had felt helpless. Now they finally had a way to help. They couldn't stand the thought of Emily losing everything all over again. As word spread, even strangers began to donate. By morning, they had raised enough money not only for the surgery, but also for the care both dogs would need afterward. Still, nothing was guaranteed. Gemma could be too weak for surgery, or her body could reject the new kidney. The waiting was unbearable. The vet was amazed by how many people came through the clinic to check on Emily and ask about Gemma. The dog, who once had nothing now, had an entire community standing behind her, hoping for the best. When the vet finally came out to speak to Emily, everyone held their breath. Emily had experienced many dark days in her life, but this would not be one of them. Gemma had survived. In the days that followed, she was monitored closely to make sure she healed properly. It was as if Gemma could feel all the love surrounding her, and she fought hard for Emily. Much sooner than expected, Gemma was strong enough to go home. More than ever, Emily treasured the bond she shared with her. Their family would change again years later, when Emily found a second chance at love. But Gemma would always remain one of the most important beings in Emily's life. Thanks for watching. Join us again for even more incredible stories.